Hello, welcome to La Excellence. In our Ecology and Environment series, let us discuss topic 8, that is climate change related concepts. Initially, we planned for these 8 concepts in this series. And due to the request of few students, we want to extend this program for one more week. We will inform you the topics at the earliest. Now, let's start with this climate change and related issues. If you have gone through the previous questions, every year, at least one question we get from this particular topic climate change, conventions, reasons, etc. So, now let's understand climate change related concepts, climate change related conventions. First, let us understand this. What is the meaning of climate change? Climate change, that means shift in the long term patterns. Shift in the long term weather patterns is called as climate change. This shift can lead to changes in temperatures, precipitation, winds, and other climate indicators. What are the causes for climate change? See, let's understand this. If you are watching this video, I assume that you know the basics. That's why I'm giving you the brief. Right. What are the causes of climate change? What are the effects of climate change? Causes can be natural and man-made. The most of the reasons that we have mentioned here are man-made. Rapid industrialization, energy use, agricultural practices, deforestation, whatever leads to more greenhouse gases, that leads to global warming, that is causing climate change. What are the effects? It increases the temperatures, which we call as global warming, raises the sea level, unpredictable weather patterns, sometimes hailstorms, etc. Increase in extreme weather events like floods and droughts, land degradation, wildlife, loss of wildlife and biodiversity due to these impacts. Other than these, let's understand the social impacts. Social impacts of climate change. It leads to displacement, we call them as climate refugees. Poverty, loss of livelihood, hunger, malnutrition, diseases. These are some of the social impacts of climate change. Now, the word climate change is clear. Now, to understand the word climate change, we have to understand greenhouse gases. What is this? What is a greenhouse gas? To understand that, we have to understand this greenhouse effect. What is a greenhouse effect? Solar radiation, incoming solar radiation. Some part is reflected back by the atmosphere, some part is absorbed by the gases in the atmosphere. These gases are called as greenhouse gases. This effect, that is solar radiation, absorption and then getting heated up, that's called greenhouse effect. Greenhouse effect. Now, the gases that leads to this particular effect are called as greenhouse gases. Let's see. These are the greenhouse gases. Water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, sulfur dioxide, tropospheric or ground level ozone, fluorinated gases. These are all called greenhouse gases. In general, whenever we read about greenhouse gases, we think of these. But fluorinated gases, yes, they contribute to ozone depletion. They also contribute to the climate change because it leads to greenhouse effect. Now let's understand a important word called global warming potential. That means each gas or each component in the atmosphere, it has its own potential. For example, if you observe here, carbon dioxide, we tend to compare it with the carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide, let's say, its global warming potential is 1 unit, methane's potential is 25 units, nitrous oxide 300 units, fluorinated gases, they have very high global warming potential. But then, carbon dioxide causes the highest contribution to the greenhouse gases. That means in the atmosphere, other gases are less as compared to this carbon dioxide. Right. We understood greenhouse gases. Now, let's understand this. Greenhouse gases, they lead to this phenomena called as global warming. Global warming means increase in the average temperatures. Global warming means long-term heating of the Earth's climate system, which is observed more predominantly during the post-industrial period. This effect is called global warming effect. That means average temperatures are increasing because of more incoming solar radiation and less reflection. We can say And the result of this global warming is damage to the corals, rising sea level, warmer oceans, permafrost is melting, changes in the plant cycle, stronger storms and cyclones, more changing rainfall patterns, high temperatures, more droughts, wildfires, less snow and ice caps. So these are all impacts of global warming. Global warming simply means increase in the average temperatures of the Earth's surface. This is very important. Recently, this is in news. After CO2, that is carbon dioxide, most important greenhouse material is this black carbon. What is this black carbon? We also call it as soot. Black carbon is the resultant of incomplete combustion of fossil fuels and biomass. It is a particulate matter, black carbon. It consists of elemental carbon, and when it enters into the atmosphere, it has high capacity to absorb the solar radiation. Let's say thermal power plant or high vehicle traffic movement is there in a particular area. Then this can accumulate as a soot, which we call it as particulate matter 2.5 also. It is also leading to climate change. Recently, this is in news because soot and its impact over Karakoram, Himalayas, and the Hindu Kush mountain region, KHKH region. This particular region on this, the impact is there, especially due to this black carbon. World Bank has released a report saying that regional countries in these mountain regions, they have to take the measures, otherwise it is going to cause huge damages to the river system and the climate system of that particular area. In this context, we have to differentiate between black carbon and brown carbon. Black carbon, it is emitted by high temperature combustion process. In general, it is released due to the incomplete combustion. But brown carbon is emitted by complete combustion of biomass. If you observe, this one is brown carbon, this is black carbon. So full combustion is different, partial combustion is different. So black carbon, major sources of black carbon includes forest fires, fossil fuel burning, and wood and other fires. If you observe the brown carbon, major factor is forest fires and others are less. Anyway, brown carbon, black carbon, what are the differences? This is important, and black carbon has high potential as a greenhouse gas or greenhouse material. This is what we were discussing about soot. Black carbon is nothing but soot. For example, if you observe the this vehicle exhaust or some of the industries, especially thermal power plants, etc., they release this fine particulate matter, which is called as particulate matter 2.5. That means its diameter is less than 2.5 micrometers. It can cause health damages also when we inhale. That can go and affect our lungs also. When it gets deposited over, let's say, mountains or water, it can cause pollution. So soot, which we call as black carbon, is the result of incomplete combustion of hydrocarbons. With regard to climate change, we have to understand this word sea level rise. Why? Because this is one of the impacts of climate change. Sea level rise is primarily caused by two factors. One, global warming. Two, global warming means more temperatures, which leads to thermal expansion of the water, then melting of the glaciers and ice. That also leads to more water accumulating. This can lead to rising sea levels. That means climate change can lead to rise in the sea levels, which can inundate the coastal areas, coastal towns, which can affect the coral reefs in the nearby regions, which can affect the mangroves, which can affect the estuaries and backwaters located in the coastal regions. This one is also in news with regard to climate change. Glacial melting in the third pole region due to climate change. This is highly reported. What is it? What do we mean by third pole? Arctic, Antarctic, two poles, north and south. But this region, which is called as Himalayas, Karakoram, Hindu Kush region, is called as third pole region because it sees the highest snowfall. That's why it is called third pole region. This region, it has India, China and other countries. We all are industrializing. This is leading to more air pollution. more increase in the temperatures, which leads to local factors, plus in general global warming is there, climate change we are experiencing, that is also leading to heavy glacial melt in the third pole region, especially as this is located in the near to the tropical region. The impact is felt more. What happens if there is glacial melt in the third pole region? This region has some of the largest rivers: Indus, Ganga River, Amudarya, Yellow River, Yangtze River, Irrawaddy River, Brahmaputra River. For many of the rivers, this region is the hotbed. This region provides as a source. But what happens when there is a heavy glacial melt? In one season, floods; another season, snow won't be there for the water availability. That means droughts and floods, they will be experienced more in this particular region, and the country is dependent upon this particular region. The other impact of climate change and global warming is this: ocean acidification. Because of increased CO2 levels in the atmosphere, atmospheric CO2 molecules will be absorbed by the water, especially the saline water. That leads to formation of carbonic acid, which will impact the coral reefs and other marine organisms. That's why ocean acidification is one of the biggest problems which we are facing due to the climate change and global warming. The next impact is urban heat island effect. Urban heat island effect, as it's not directly caused by the climate change and global warming. This is due to the localized factors. But then climate change and global warming, they're aggravating this particular effect. That means urban areas are becoming more hotter as compared to nearby areas. This effect is known as urban heat island effect. Along with these impacts, climate change and global warming, they pose other risks like increasing disasters, especially the high intense cyclones, floods, droughts. Now, we need to deal with all these things. What did we do then? Did we do anything? Yes. Let's understand what the countries tried to do to address this particular problem. Let's understand this report, Brundtland Commission. Brundtland Commission was appointed to define the sustainability, to define how do we develop with environmental protection in the mind. Then this Brundtland Commission has provided a particular report called Our Common Future. This is the report submitted by Brundtland Commission. This particular commission first time has defined what is sustainable development. Sustainable development means we need to develop. Present generation should develop, but they should also take care of the future generations' needs. So we should use and conserve the natural resources. That's how this particular Brundtland Commission in Our Common Future has reported. This has become the base document for other environmental conventions and conferences. This one is the primary convention with regard to climate change. What is it? UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. UNFCCC, this was negotiated at the Earth Summit 1992, New York City. As of now, we have 197 member countries. To implement this particular convention, we have certain protocols. We will discuss what they are. Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreement, we will discuss what are they. But this UNFCCC is not legally binding. That means the member countries who sign and ratify this particular convention, they need not mandatorily implement the provisions of this particular convention because it is not legally binding. This particular convention has brought in this particular principle called common but differentiated responsibility. That means every country has some common responsibilities, but few countries have more responsibilities as compared to others. What are those few countries? Generally, developed countries, they are industrialized. They are the ones who have contributed to the greenhouse gases initially. That's why for their historical responsibility, they have to take more responsibility now. This principle is called as common but differentiated responsibilities. In prelims examination, they might give some question on this because when we understand about Paris Agreement, we will understand how this principle is violated, right? Now let's understand this particular fund, Global Environmental Facility, with regard to climate change. Global Environmental Facility, this was established during the Earth Summit. We call it as Rio Earth Summit 1992. This is Global Environmental Facility. This is jointly managed by United Nations Development Program, World Bank, United Nations Environment Program. As of now, 183 member countries are part of it. This is the financial mechanism. This funds most of the areas to address the environmental problems. Let's say climate change, biodiversity related issues, ozone layer depletion. In all these areas, Global Environmental Facility funds. GEF, Global Environmental Facility. Next important one is reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation program, which is also called as READ program. READ is the initiative by FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization, UNDP, UNEP. This is created under 2008. In the year 2008, this says that to address the climate change, we have to reduce the greenhouse gases. To reduce these greenhouse gases, we have to go for better forest management practices. For that particular purpose, this READ initiative was brought in. This protects and better manages the forest resources. There is this advanced agreement called as READ Plus. This says that it's not just reducing the deforestation and forest degradation. We have to actively engage in enhancing the forest carbon stocks, sustainably managing the forests, enhancing the overall carbon stock in a particular country. That's about this program. READ is related to climate change. When we discussed about UNFCCC, we said there are two important protocols under UNFCCC. One is Kyoto Protocol, second one is Paris Agreement. Let us understand what is this Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol, this was as we know that in 1992 Earth Summit, we formed this UNFCCC. This Kyoto Protocol, this was signed in 1997. Its first period was over in 2012 itself. It was effective from 2005. We extended it to 2020. Under this Kyoto Protocol, we wanted to reduce 6 greenhouse gases: methane, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, sulfur hexafluorocarbons. These 6 gases were given under this particular Kyoto Protocol. In Paris Agreement, let us see how this is changed. But under Kyoto, 6 greenhouse gases. 192 countries signed. The target is to reduce by 2012 because we started implementing it from 2005. So by 2012, we wanted to reduce 5.2% of greenhouse gases as compared to 1990 level. To implement that, Kyoto Protocol has proposed 3 flexible market mechanisms. One is joint implementation, which says that two industrialized countries can come together. They can jointly implement a project, maybe in either of these countries or in some other country. That's called joint implementation. This project will save or will reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, technology or project. That's called joint implementation mechanism. The other one is clean development mechanism. That means a developed country reduces the greenhouse gases by investing in some other country, that is developing country or least developed country. That mechanism is called as clean development mechanism. Other than these two, there's one more method which is very famous, that's called emission trading, which we also call as carbon markets. Emission trading means an industrialized country, let's say it is given some carbon budget. That means, okay, you can spend this much carbon. That means you can emit this much carbon. But that year, some industry in their country tried to reduce the carbon emissions, so they saved something. They can sell that part to other country who are unable to reduce their carbon emissions. These are called as carbon credits. The saleable bonds are called as carbon credits. This particular trading is called as emission trading. See this word? Carbon credit, very, very important. Carbon credits are sold across various stock markets. In India also, we can sell it in Indian stock markets regulated under SEBI. Carbon credit, as we said, it's just a tradable permit which is generated by any country or any organization which saved on its carbon budget. This process is called as carbon offset. Offset means, see, let's say this particular country, overall that particular country CO2 produced, more emissions are there, this particular country. But this particular country went for renewable energy and other sources. That's how they reduce this. So they can buy from them. This country, as it was unable to meet its target, it can buy. That's called offsetting, balancing it out is called offsetting, carbon offsetting in climate change. Terms are important in prelims examination. On these terms, there are many questions previously, right? Please understand these terms. Next agreement is Paris Agreement, Kyoto, Paris. Paris Agreement, this was signed in the year 2015. This entered into force in 2016 under UNFCCC, Kyoto Protocol, and then now Paris Agreement. Under Paris Agreement, every country has to contribute. Every country has to reduce. Under Kyoto Protocol, developed countries, which are industrialized countries, which are called Annex 1 countries, they have to contribute more. But under Paris Agreement, every country has to contribute. India, China, all developing countries and developed countries, everyone has to contribute. Some people criticize that it is affecting combined but differentiated responsibility principle that we got under this UNFCCC. But then it is said that as climate change impacts all of us, it's the responsibility of all of us to reduce it. So many countries agreed, and then it is made not mandatory. That means the Paris goals are voluntary. They said, you formulate your own goals, intended nationally determined contribution goals. Based on that, you implement. For every 5 years, you have to revise these goals. That's how Paris Agreement is designed. Every country has to submit. Then what are the goals of India? India said we are going to reduce emission intensity, carbon emission intensity to at least 33% by 2030 compared to what level? Compared to 2005 levels. Next, we are going to generate at least 40% of our energy from non-fossil fuel sources. That's why we are going forward with renewable energy. And then we also said that we will create a carbon sink. Carbon sink means that absorbs the carbon. That here in this case forest. 3.5 billion to 3 billion, 2.5 billion to 3 billion tons of CO2 will be absorbed by 2030 because of our carbon sinks. That's how India has planned. And there are other goals also given by India. These are the primary INDCs. Let's understand this word emission intensity. Emission intensity means to produce 1 unit of economic activity. How many units of CO2 or CO2 emissions are there? That's called emission intensity. More units of economic production with less emissions. Will that be beneficial or not? Yes. Now let's understand some of the terms related to climate change. First one is climate justice. Climate justice means there are common goals. Historically, some countries, they have emitted more. They have to take the responsibility. And then each country should be given some emission brackets. That means, based on the historical context, based on the developmental needs, how much a country can emit, how much a country's carbon emissions can be. Simply, climate justice is an idea wherein what are the causes of climate change and how to address them, who should take the responsibility and how much. That's called climate justice. The next term related to climate change is carbon footprint. That means how much carbon emissions each activity, each individual, each region, each nation is emitting. That's called carbon footprint. Carbon footprint means how much directly or indirectly are we emitting through our activities. That's called carbon footprint. So we should strive for reducing the carbon footprint. The next very important term related to climate change, which is in news recently, is carbon sequestration. Carbon emissions, carbon dioxide, this is absorbed by the trees for respiration, for the oceans, etc. But if we have to sequester it, that means artificially absorb from the atmosphere, store it at some place and use it for something else, will that be useful to address the climate change concerns? Yes. That's how if we can absorb the carbon emissions, carbon dioxide, and in the gaseous form, store it. Sequester means absorb and store. So carbon sequestration methods are suggested to address the issue of climate change. Next word with regard to climate change is green bonds. Green bonds simply means investing in the areas, companies, which are investing in environment friendly products or environment friendly projects. These bonds are called green bonds. Let's say a renewable energy company, solar energy company, if it issues the bonds, we call them as green bonds because they are for, let's see, renewable energy, clean energy, sustainable water management. These projects, they are environment friendly. That's why business models based on environment friendly approach, they tend to issue bonds which are called as green bonds. These need to be encouraged so that more investment will be there in the environment friendly areas, which will reduce the emissions, which will reduce the impacts of global warming and climate change. Next one is carbon sink. Carbon sink means the one that absorbs the carbon. Trees, they absorb the carbon. Ocean and ocean surface, plankton, the phytoplanktons, etc. over the ocean surface, they also absorb the carbon. These are all called carbon sink. When we discussed about our INDCs, Paris Agreement and INDCs, we said that India is going to develop carbon sink of 2.5 gigatons to 3 gigatons. Yes or no? That means carbon sink. Finally, we have this term carbon neutrality. That means whatever we are emitting, they should be equal to what the atmosphere can absorb. That's called carbon neutrality. USA has requested India also to formulate carbon neutral policy by 2050. USA asked China and many other countries are discussing on this. Carbon neutrality by 2050. We said this is good as an idea, but we are developing country. We should have more leverage, Sarno, to develop. That's why we said we will think on it. In general, the concept of carbon neutrality says emissions and absorption by the nature should balance. That's called carbon neutrality. So we call it as zero carbon emissions. Zero carbon emissions means carbon emissions need not be zero. Carbon emissions should equal to the absorption, zero carbon emissions. Finally, we have to understand this National Action Plan on Climate Change. To implement various international conventions, Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change, it has brought in 8 missions. 8 missions. These are the 8 missions. These 8 are for addressing the concerns of climate change. These are the terms and concepts with regard to climate change. If you have any questions, queries, you can ask us in the comment section. All the very best. Thank you very much.